The existing context of rapid change being chaos is unsustainable. External world is an exact corresponding replica of our internal. Our attention essentially collapses waves of light into physical particles of matter.
Dr. Stephen Young, welcome to Soul Connected. And on a really short notice, I am totally thrilled and excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to connect. Usually these podcasts and these recordings like magic happens. So
Absolutely. And I didn't plan a whole lot today, but I really want to dive into to the alchemy stuff with you because I think that is one of your main focus. And I kind of prepared, I don't know if it's the right perspective. Can you see it the right way or is it
yeah.
reverse? Yeah. So it's Carl Gustav Jung, The Psychology of Alchemy. And times are so crazy right now. And I feel like every single one of us is going through this phase of inner chaos. And I think that you have developed a body mind technique that can help us to find tools to navigate through us. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, in general, I think whenever large amounts of change is happening, it's pretty common that we contextualize it as chaos, right? And a lot of times, if we simply just recognize there's a lot of changes happening, it's a very different physiological response than the word chaos, right? And that's really what's happening because the world is changing faster and faster and faster. I mean, in fact, Ray Kurzweil believes that by 2032, each year, there'll be so much technological advancement and change that our consciousness can't even comprehend it. And he sort of made a metaphor like if we time travel 500 years ago, like a person from 500 years ago to now, their minds would be blown. Like, what is
Mm,
this video calls and all the things?
of course.
So he basically said by 2032, every year will be like going 500 years forward, right? That's
Okay.
how,
Hmm.
yeah. And the reason I'm offering that context is the the existing context of rapid change being chaos is unsustainable. Like we're not going to do well as humans within that context. So it
Mm.
may be helpful to just first contextualize more and more changes happening faster and faster, right? And how do we accommodate, that rapid change? And in terms of a physical tool, I was one of the co-founders of this chamber called the Immortal Chamber, and what we've done is we basically put all of nature's energies in all its forms, like light, sound, vibration, electromagnetic field, and then hydrogen gas, biological. And we put it into a person's system. And essentially, the system has this incredible intelligence to restore itself, right? So it's like self-regulates because you're giving it all form of nature's energy.
Hmm.
So that's sort of the tech thing. And then the inner technology, this is sort of the hermetic principles and, the if anyone looks into alchemy, you'll read something like turning lead into gold,
Yeah.
right? And so, in fact, there's been three documented alchemists in modern history that was able to physically turn lead into gold, but they knew that they had
Really?
to turn their internal, yeah, lead into gold in
Uh,
order to make that happen. And
oh.
so, and most of them realize that that is a very powerful, like once they learn how to do it, they realize it's so powerful, they actually can't just like share it with the world because once you understand how this works, you're basically wielding reality, right? You're not a player in a game of reality. You become
Mm.
the programmer of the
Of
game of
reality.
reality.
Mm. But so you're saying that there have been people who
Mhm.
were able to transform their inner state of consciousness so
Mhm.
far that they could
Mhm.
transform metals into gold?
Mhm. Yep, lead to
Wow.
gold.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Three
Well, that is
documented.
what alchemy is all about, isn't it? Like we have to transform the inner state to become something more purified on the outside and on the inside.
Yeah, one of my favorite hermetic laws is the law of correspondence, right?
Mm.
And it's the basic definition is as above, so below,
Yeah.
as within, so throughout. And what
Mm.
it means basically is how spirit, God, the universe works, is how our life works, is how our tiniest physiological chemical reactions work. It's the same,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
And it
Yeah.
also, that's as above, so below. And then as within, so throughout means that the external world is an exact corresponding replica of our internal,
Mm.
right? So we have,
Yeah.
the double slit experiment shows that our attention essentially collapses waves of light into physical particles of matter that matches essentially our consciousness.
Hmm. I think it's such an amazing time where quantum physics and spiritual seekers and nature oriented healing methods and all of that is coming back into our awareness and is even scientifically proven and of scientific interest. That is so exciting.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. We tend to see technological advancement as like this evolution and this learning process. But what's actually really happening is we are remembering
Mm,
because there was a time in human history where we already had all these incredible wisdoms and knowledge, and we were way more advanced than we are now. And so what was shown to me was we're remembering to
mm,
dash member, right? In other words, like we're remembering what was forgotten so that we come together
mm,
as a humanity, like to
mm.
member again.
And you are talking about civilizations like Atlantis or
Mhm.
even pre-Egypt,
Yep.
which is being discovered like now in the Sahara, that underneath all the layers of the sand, there is actually proof
Yep.
for an even older civilization. It's so amazing that finally science is also catching up with that. So I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, you said that by 2032, the development will be so fast. And you are a bio lover. You love the body as well as the mind
Mhm.
and the spirit. Do you think that with the current neurological setting that we are going to be able to even catch up with that? Or do you think we need some kind of either, well, it's just a couple of years ahead, either a very fast biological evolution or even something like a bio technological interface?
Yeah. Well, I can see there'll be a bifurcation of humanity, which isn't a bad thing because in the law of polarity, one of the other Hermetic principles, there's a deeper understanding that says you go through two to get to one, right? You need a
Mm,
contrast like hot and cold to unify the understanding of temperature. And so I can see that in the future, and Ray Kurzweil believes by 2032, there'll be nanorobots in our brains. You know how they're working on Neuralink, which is like a physical large chip in the human brain. This has
mm,
already been done. And
mm,
once you have the chip in the brain, you can basically, through your mind, have access to like AI computing powers,
mm,
right? Like you become super intelligent. And by 2032, we won't need like a physical thing. They're just like nanorobots are small, right? You can just take it into your body. And there's going to be people that are going to want that because they're going to think and feel that if they don't have that, they'll be at a disadvantage to others that will,
mm,
right? And that's in a way true, but what they don't know is you can accomplish the same things through spiritual and energetic practices,
mm,
right? And so, in other words, there'll be a probably a large population of people who do it using technology, new technology, and there'll be some people that will use ancient technology, which is
mm.
the spiritual energetic practices.
Which kind of brings more of an internal feeling of control, that it's something we develop ourselves and that it's not being put into us. Like many people are afraid of AI interfaces, especially if they are merging with our own neural network.
Yeah, I think the fear exists in a context of capabilities from an intelligence perspective, right? I always say, like, I don't think they're going to be able to make an AI that can collapse waves of light into physical matter in the orientation of the AI's consciousness. I don't think that's going to happen, right? So what I'm getting at is, I think as we remember our divine powers and divine capabilities, not just our human five senses capabilities, there's no way that AI could like be more powerful than humans, right?
Mm,
And also, AI is a form of technology, right? And all technologies from a hammer to a microwave to, AI essentially is an extension of the human's capabilities,
mm,
right? Like they designed it to help them do things better way, faster, more powerful, and all the things. And so I think it's important for us to remember that we're like the source, right? AI can think more and calculate more, but again, they cannot, you know, I know I was just in Tibet and a monk in Tibet melted his hand into stone to show what humans are capable of. And then the guy on this trip that was leading this mission, his teacher basically sat in front of all his students, turned into a rainbow and like disappeared.
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah. I
God.
mean, yeah, I've seen stuff way more weird and unusual than this in my lifetime, and so these aren't unusual to me. And so, and that's the true capabilities of humans that was erased and suppressed, right? And
Mm.
so, and once we remember that, we go, oh, it'll be fine.
Mm. So, what is it exactly that you consider the superpower of the human race?
Yeah. It's hinted at in, spiritual texts and religious texts, right? Like if I just go with Christianity, there's a line that says we're made in the image of God. And what that line doesn't mean is we all have white beards and hair like a male, because God is not, obviously the typical is like some kind of guy with white beard. It means that we have the same capabilities, right? And I can sort of extrapolate this, my theory is that we make biophotons, like 72 to 78% of our DNA doesn't make proteins, it actually makes light,
Mm.
right? And so 24/7 we're making millions of these light particles that are emanating away from our body, and that light particle is and was us, but when it leaves our body it's going to think it's its own separate particle, which it is. It's a paradox. It's true, it was Stephen, but now it's also, and I always use the name Bob the light particle,
Mhm.
right? And so, but Bob, the light particle came from me, and it's going to have the capabilities of my spirit, my soul, my capabilities. So we are like the biophoton of God, basically, right? We're source or spirit, and we share the same capabilities. Right? Another metaphor to describe it is it's the drop in the ocean and within the ocean,
Mm.
right? The drop is a separate drop, but it's also the ocean. Right. And so once we realize that, that means we essentially have godlike powers. We can create, at Dahmer, where I've studied, humans have, put the gods in order. We tend to think of hierarchy, like a god is more powerful, more capable, but that's not the case. There is no hierarchy. Like technically, we're all on the same playing ground.
Yeah, so everything that is ever existing is a part of that
Mhm.
source. So
Yes.
basically, if you follow that logic or that understanding, everything has this superpower. But what do
Yep.
you think is the unique way of human creation, the human creational power?
Yeah, it's interesting. Humans. If I just use a little bit of Dahmer context, nature, like trees and plants, only has the energy of life and existence. Humans have, it's like the yin and yang. Humans have life and existence energy, as well as non-life or non-existence energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in modern history, we might call that light and darkness,
Mm,
right? Essentially, there's a part of us that wants to exist, and there's a part of us that wants to wipe out existence, which is
mm.
why humans have led wars and killed people and all that
You
stuff, right? So
mean
we have
Eros
this.
and Thanatos? Yeah,
Exactly, right. So
yeah.
we have this sort of dance between these two forces. And so what I'm getting at is, humans with godlike powers, with existence and non-existence forces in them, can create incredible life-promoting things as well as life stopping things. And
Mm,
that's what we see. This is just the reality.
mm,
And so, and I'm a huge fan of like not judging anything. It just is. We're being shown this contrast, not to say, life is evil and non-life, or non-life is evil and life is good. It's really for us to experience the contrast to go, oh, wait, we have the ability to choose and create our reality. Instead of judging the reality, we realize we can choose and create reality.
mm. So it's more like the conscious part of actually choosing, and not so much the power that is the same in nature, but we can actually choose what kind of reality we want.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think it's very helpful and, important for humans to substitute the word balance with harmony and substitute the word control with choice.
Mm,
Right?
mm,
Because control suggests there's some other thing,
mm,
right, that you want to keep out or in. Whereas choice is you're in charge of all of it. There's no
mm,
other thing that you're not in charge of,
mm,
right? And then balance is two separate things that you adjust volume and intensity of, whereas harmony is they coexist.
mm. But would you agree that these polarities of light and dark, chaos or pain, and joy and peace is a process that keeps life moving?
Yep.
And that also makes development happen. So, in the sense of purification and alchemical transmutation.
Yeah, yeah. if we go back to the biophoton example, when Bob emanates away from my DNA and my cells, right? And it's conscious. It's thinking. It's like, oh my God, I'm Bob. What's my purpose? Well, technically, Bob doesn't have a purpose. Bob is just meant to bounce all over the room, all over the world, all over the universe, the galaxy. Eventually, it'll bounce back. And we know we have actually receptors for biophotons, right? So when it bounces back towards me, back to source, what happens is every vibrational frequency that it experienced is data for me to experience the universe and all of reality as myself, right? And so we are essentially like the biophoton of God, where humans love to think they have a purpose. We're going to save the world. We're going to protect the children, all that stuff. But we're really here just to experience what I call the totality of
Yeah.
reality,
Yeah.
the pain and pleasure, the joy, the
Yeah.
sadness,
Yeah.
all of it, right? And if we look at an oscilloscope of energy, right, it goes up and down. And so if this is
Mm.
like pain and this is pleasure, we're meant to experience the full wave
Yeah.
of energy, not
Yeah.
just half, either the upper half or the lower half.
Yeah, it's so interesting. A couple of days ago in a meditation, I had that picture of the the soul or the oversoul as an essence of God, a
Mhm.
part essence of God, which is like a sun sending the rays at the same time, because there is no time, into all different kinds of vibration dimensions, species, even into just elementals, not just humans, but or extraterrestrial beings, but also all kind of high and low vibrational dimensions. So there is not really this sense of evolution, like my soul is growing, but more like my soul is visiting all these different kinds of facets of life at the same time, just to get the whole picture.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. The metaphor that came to me was we're literally playing hide and seek with our divine selves, right? So, like we were fully eternal bliss, everything everywhere at once. We chose to incarnate and come into separation. And that's like, our spirit telling our physical selves, you go hide, I'll find you, right? And so that's the game. So, yeah, it's more like a revealing game than evolution.
Mm, yeah. Well, I'm a psychotherapist, and
Mhm.
some people who are listening are interested in finding new ways to find emotional and psychological balance.
Yep.
And what I'm really interested in, well, your point of view, if we go through painful times in our lives,
Mhm.
in my understanding, all pain is always a kind of a mirror to us, mirroring something, a part of us that is maybe still not understood, or a truth that needs to be revealed.
Mhm.
Of course, that's a very different situation when you are in a really big crisis and you can't really see what's supposed to be recognized by your soul, your awareness. When you are really stuck in emotional fight or flight mode or survival mode.
Mhm.
And what do you think is the most important part for us to, or even technique, body mind oriented, to gain the perspective of what is this crisis really telling me? What, or is there anything I need to learn about myself or about love itself, about life itself? What do you need to get into that inner space of awareness?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting. We humans live in a program context, and they're trying to solve and navigate within these program contexts because they don't know they're in a program context,
Hmm.
right? For example, common program context is like a human can't walk through a wall,
Mm,
but I know humans that can put their limbs through a wall and vibrate in phase,
mm,
right? And so what we think is impossible is literally just a story. And what
mm,
I'm getting at is, in your example, it's basically, I want this outcome and it's not happening. What the hell? I'm feeling all this pain and worry and all the feelings. How do I navigate that? Well, you know, one of the other Hermetic principles is the law of rhythm, right? And that means everything in the universe is in motion. Nothing is still and static. And so your life problems and all the crises and suffering basically is coming from either an attached outcome, right? You want something to happen and it's not happening. You're like, oh my God, this is a huge problem. Or an attached old story.
mhm,
right? An old story that you still have about yourself, circumstances, life, someone else that is leading to an interpretation of the reality that is causing some kind of pain and suffering.
Mhm.
And most people would navigate the pain and, they go into what's the lesson and all the things, which you can. But on the front end, you can simply let go of the story from the past about the person's situation or yourself, or let go of the desired outcome,
Mhm.
right? Because when you do that, then actually there are no such thing as problems. Like everything is just like, okay, I wanted a hamburger, but my friend brought back pizza instead of hamburger. But if you really want a hamburger, you'd be like, what the hell? You bought the wrong food. But if you're not attached to the hamburger, it's like, all right, great, I get to have pizza, right? And so, yeah, I just want to kind of share that context because again, the question was really about how to navigate the context of problems and pain and the lessons and all that stuff. I'm always like, you can do that, but there's a whole nother game, a whole nother context that you can play, right? And which is again letting go of attachments to those stories and the outcomes. Now, within your context, I can answer that. I think in personal development and psychology, it's interesting. It's such a industry. I'm gonna, some this might rub people the wrong way, but I treated patients for 20 years, right? So I went through the medical system. The entire system, both mental and physical medicine, was designed to keep people ill. If
And
you
to
notice the
keep
language,
people functioning in the system.
yeah, you
Yeah.
have diabetes, you have depression, you have not you're currently experiencing diabetes, you're
Mm.
currently experiencing depression, right? The languaging literally imprints that onto the person. In fact, when a diabetes person says, I have diabetes long enough, eventually they say, I'm a diabetic,
Mm.
right? It becomes their identity. And as you
Mm.
know, once it becomes your identity, it's that much more rooted in you.
Mm.
So we can just tell by the languaging, the spells, the original codes of medicine. It was never designed to
Mm.
to
I
cure
absolutely
people,
agree.
right? To
Yeah.
help people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to call that out before I answer the question,
Mm.
because for most people that are having some kind of difficulty in life, when they get into, personal development, spirituality, what tends to happen is they go, "Oh, I should be happy about this."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Actually shame and judge themselves for
Yeah.
actually having to
Oh, yes.
respond to
Yeah. Yeah.
pain and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation within the game is you first honor the pain in the
Mm.
response,
Yeah.
right? Because that is still a part of you,
Mm.
right? It's like an inner child that's like, oh my God, freaking out. The last thing you want to tell this inner child is like, no, 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 you can't do this,
Mm.
right? And so you want to love, that aspect of yourself.
Mm.
And so first give it space to feel all the pain. Don't
Mm.
decrease it, right? And this is very David Hawkins. He talks about increasing, sort of that pain, right? It's just energy that wants to transmute. If you try to reduce it and contain it, you're holding on to it and it doesn't have a chance to transmute. And
Mm.
so you allow it to fully feel like if you're like in a 3 out of 10 sadness, you want to go to like a 10 out of 10 sadness, right? And
Mm.
fully lean into it because that typically and honor that because in that path of loving it, something will get revealed as a byproduct
Mm.
versus trying to seek the answer, right? In other words, the gift or the lesson. The lesson, gift, answer comes as a byproduct of loving the experience.
So let us walk through a very typical example. Many
Sure.
people have issues sleeping,
Yep.
and they tend to wake up in the middle of the night or early in the morning, feel very
Yep.
stressed out. Don't even, most of them don't even really know why. Is of course the cortisol level is totally up all
Mhm.
day and is counteracting the melatonin.
Mhm.
That is the physiological part. But
Yep.
waking up with that sense of being alert and having anxiety and don't if you don't really have like a clear connection to what that means right now, what would you suggest to people who are under this constant alert and
Mhm.
don't really know what the pain is referring to because everything in life seems uncertain? Jobs are uncertain, families are really stressful,
Mhm.
the whole government is playing crazy in America and Germany, everywhere. So, what would you suggest someone who has this feeling of the whole life seems to be an uncertainty for me?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that entire context, I think of those Russian nesting dolls, right? There's like the doll that has another doll that has another doll.
Yeah,
So the
Matryoshka.
context that you just presented with the language that you presented with is a very programmed, I call it Western society doll,
Mm,
right? And it's a few dolls in, it's not the outermost doll, right? Because in this context, again, it goes back to when children are growing up, what do the parents ask them? They go, "What do you want to be?" Not who do you want to be?
Hmm.
It's what do you want to be?
Mm.
Because it's already languaging to be some kind of worker in something because the entire system was designed to move the economic engine along, right? And then of course, then we're kind of programmed with like, what's your mission? What's your soul mission or path? Like, why are you here? Again, that's all to give ourselves meaning and significance so our ego feels awesome about ourselves. Right. And then the other thing is death. Like we tend to fear death. But really, when you die, you literally just go back to infinite everywhere all at once, feeling eternal bliss. Not the worst thing ever. And the reason I'm saying all this is if you start to realize all of that, then all this uncertainty and all the things that you're contextualizing isn't that strange, right? Because you go, oh, wait, let's say, I don't know, America goes into nuclear war with Russia, we all die. Oh, well, like I just go back to,
Source.
spirit and
Mm.
experience eternal source.
Mm.
And at some point, if I choose to come back, I can,
Mm.
right? Not the worst thing, right? I mean, in Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, he asked God, well, God was teaching him about that there's no good or bad. You humans are making this up. And of course, and whenever I speak about this, in groups and stuff, people always bring up, well, what about murder?
Mm.
And so Neil Donald Walsh asked God, what about murder? And God said, well, there was a time in human history if one person wanted to take another person's life, the other person would be like, oh, you can have it. I'll just come back with an even better body, better experience. You can have
Mhm.
it. It
Mhm.
wasn't even murder. It was just like, sure, you can
Mm.
you can have my life.
Mm.
Right. And that's a very different context than now. And
Mm.
so again, I always go back to whenever I get a question, recognize that that question exists in a context. And then the next thing is you recognize, oh yeah, this is just a context that's been programmed by society.
Mm.
And that there's infinite other variations that you get to choose about this context,
Mm.
right? Because why try to win the game that you did not create for your
Mm.
enjoyment
Yeah.
when you can create the game that you enjoy, right?
Mm.
So again, that's another answer of like just change the context. Now, if I go into the context of what you said, I would say that the number one easiest tactical thing you can do on a daily basis is to chant the the mantra slash prayer the Hawaiians have called the Ho'oponopono.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
Because when you chant this, the phrase is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive
Mm.
me. But the key is the context of this mantra or chant needs to be very specific. And the context is, I love you, God. And for those of you that are listening or watching, if God doesn't resonate, you can use like universe, source, spirit,
Mm.
whatever
Mm.
this infinite intelligence is, to you. So it's, I love you. In this case, I'm going to say God. I love you, God. And the second phrase is, I'm sorry for not recognizing your love and your divine orchestration in every moment of my life,
Mhm.
right? Because we tend to judge what's happening based on the most incredibly limited perception of what's actually happening, right? For example, we know our eyes, we can only perceive 0.03% of like the visible spectrum.
Mhm.
There's like 99.7% of reality that's happening that we don't perceive. And also, right, time isn't what we think it is. We're starting to prove that with quantum mechanics, right? Time kind of folds, it's not linear. And so we are only judging and discerning from the tiniest sliver of time. We don't have the perspective of a million years, right? And so that realization tends to help. Oh, wait, I can stop freaking out.
Mm.
Right? And then essentially this prayer is saying, I have faith, 1,000 faith in you, source God spirit.
Mm.
Right. So it's, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And, the image that I was given when I first chanted this for like 30 hours a week was humans are like a little child in a car sitting on their parents' lap, and they have like this toy steering wheel. And then the parents driving the car, and the kid thinks they're driving the car,
Yeah,
but really
yeah.
the parents driving the car with the real steering wheel. And the parent would be the metaphor is God, source, spirit.
Mm.
Right. And so I think when you really lean into that and trust this divine will,
Mm.
you tend to not freak out as much.
Mm.
Like you don't have to solve it all. In fact, you're not going to be able to solve it all. Right. Like I said, in 2032, things would be so fast, your intellect cannot
Catch up.
solve it all. Not possible.
Yeah, so you're saying basically that putting everything into a really greater perspective and also questioning if what we consider the truth is actually the truth is key to our inner balance.
Yeah. I've contemplated on this for the last 36 years. I think there's only one absolute universal truth. Everything else is just a story that we make up.
Mm.
The one absolute universal truth is we don't know,
Yeah.
right? Like everything else that we think we know,
Yeah.
eventually you can reflect back always, oh no, that wasn't the whole thing, right?
Mm.
Because in the future we have perspective.
Yeah.
So really the only absolute truth in the present moment is I don't know.
Mm. And the beauty of I don't know is also I can trust because if I don't know with my really small mind, then I have no idea what kind of doors could open if I could
Mhm.
just let go of the outcome, as you said before.
Yeah, and there's a whole nother context to describe this, right? Like not knowing is means mystery, right? It's also known as the ether. All infinite probabilities and possibilities are in it. And
Mhm.
another name for that is feminine energy.
Mm.
And so another way to say it is we've been relying on purely masculine energy to try
Oh,
to drive
yes.
the world,
Yeah.
and it's not working. It's
Mm.
unsustainable. And
Mm.
we need more feminine energy. And part of the
Yeah.
feminine energy is the mystery, the unknown, and embracing that.
And the allowing.
Yeah.
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 That's really interesting. I also wanted to dig into a little bit of what's going on in the world right now, if you don't mind. And I
Yeah.
keep wondering, like when we are in a cataclystic phase, like something might be happening now, I think. Um, when do you think, or how can you discern whether we are still in a phase of reorganizing and maybe shutting down old systems, old truths, old concepts that don't work anymore and that need some kind of new thinking? And where is the line between, okay, something is really going wrong here? Because what I feel, I'm just going to share that with you. Um, when I came to realize that Trump is going to be the next president again, I thought to myself, as I thought at the first time, well, he's going to create chaos. And he's not going to create it consciously to uplift the planet. But there is going to be chaos, and we can arise from that chaos like an alchemical process in a more clear way in what we don't want anymore. But now I'm starting to believe that maybe there is not really a sense of, or this isn't anymore a direction where we are going into a cataclysmic transmutation, but more like that needs to stop. What do you think about that? What is the differentiation between that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the first thing I would say is, in my lifetime, I've met either directly a very well-known famous person, or at least they're very close friends. And 100% of the time, how the media portrays that person is basically opposite of that
Mm-hmm.
person.
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time,
Okay.
right? And so it becomes really interesting. I have friends that are Trump fans and I have friends that are anti-Trump fans. And it's almost like flat earthers and round earthers. They all have proof.
Mm,
And the reason is we have something called cognitive bias, right? And so we have confirmation bias. We will only see
mm,
things that support our stories.
mm,
And we have cognitive dissonance, which means we will completely ignore things that do not support our stories.
mm,
And so I think that's really an important thing to call out when we talk about the world and what's happening, right?
mm,
Because I will say that whatever the mass media is portraying is definitely not what's actually happening.
okay.
Sure.
Mm.
Right? Because we know media has to sell fear because we
Oh
know, I
yeah.
mean, there's stats.
Mm.
Fear keeps people watching twice as much
Yeah.
as happy stuff. And so everything is skewed to get you to worry,
Mm.
and be in a fear state, right? And so we just got to call that out because for every chaotic, or judged as bad thing that's happening, if you just understand the hermetic principles, polarity and rhythm together, if I have a pendulum and I put 9 units to the left, if we want to be judgy, we can say 9 units of bad. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
we let go, it has to swing to 9 units of good
Mm.
is how reality works.
Yeah.
And we can see this, right? COVID was a incredible attempt by what I call the other team, the
Yeah.
Dharma would call
Oh
non-existence.
yes, I absolutely agree.
Yeah. Like incredible effort to literally box people,
Yeah.
right? Psychologically, biologically, physically. And guess what happened? It led to the greatest unboxing of people. Like in
Mm.
the last 4 years, there's been more spiritual awakening, more
Yeah,
evolution than ever before
yeah, yeah.
because we're seeing the law of polarity and rhythm. And once you realize that, then you go, oh yeah, nothing is good or evil or right or wrong or bad and good.
Mm.
Everything just is, right? It goes back
Mm.
to non-judgment. And so with that, I will say, again, me recognizing that stories are just stories. There's no
Mm.
truth or fact. I've been able to see a ton of facts that Trump is doing incredible stuff and facts that it's not doing incredible stuff,
We
right?
don't
I'm sort
know.
of impartial in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Watching it all unfold. But I will
Mm.
say that I'm personally involved in many things that are changing the world that's not being talked about by the media. There's like
Mm.
incredible things, hundreds of thousands of people doing world-changing things for the greater good that is just not being covered by the media,
Of
right?
course.
So
Yeah.
this goes back
Yeah.
to have a little faith in that for every unit of what you want to judge as bad is happening, the same amount of units of good is happening.
Mm. Yeah. Do you think that going into the direction of good, whatever that is the destination, or is the order in the universe, the divine order? Do you think that going into the light is the like yeah, going going forward and going into the darkness is going backwards?
I think, um, if you look at the yin and yang symbol, right, there's a reason why the black part has a white dot and the white part has a black
Mm,
dot. That's the hint that they're actually not as separate as you think, right? One contains the other
mm,
essentially.
mm,
And so that means that one isn't good or bad.
mm,
Because you can't discern light without dark, and you can't
mm,
discern dark without light. And if you notice that yin yang symbol, they're swirling, they're dancing. So it's a constant dance between light and darkness. And I believe that we are going to experience this contrast of light and dark, good and evil, and all the judgy things to simply realize all of it is God. All
mm,
of it is source.
mm,
Everything is being orchestrated,
mm,
right? And everything goes in rhythm. We had the last great reset was like 12 to 13,000 years ago. We may reset again, depending upon human consciousness in the very
mm,
near future. If we,
mm,
look at the Kogi and some of the indigenous people, they predict unless we really shift our consciousness from an extractive everything for me and I want to manifest my pleasures and me, because
mm.
that's the exact energy that led to the last reset.
You mean the
To
Younger Dryas?
So essentially, during Atlantis, the narrative of Atlantis was it's an island, and where did it sink? And
Mm,
that's a false narrative. Atlantis was essentially Earth that existed for
mm,
about 30,000
mm,
years in complete
mm,
harmony. And eventually, the other team, right, life, in other words, for 30,000 years, most of that, it existed in promoting life, brought harmony. But it was so much that the other team, which is non-life, said, well, we're gonna put checks and balances of decadence into the citizens, and over thousands of years they started creating technologies they couldn't control for more
mm,
power, and that led to the great reset, right, the great
mm,
flood. And
mm,
so we're literally at the like we're at the crossroads again, right? We're with AI, with
mm,
CERN smashing particles, with doing all kinds of portal opening, I mean a lot of things, that we are at the cutoff point again, as unless we shift away from me what I want to every decision must serve all life,
mm,
we will reset again.
mm,
And I believe what will happen is there are people who are still trying to manifest their will to feel safe and significant and all the things. They're going to experience human extinction in the very near future.
mm, mm,
There will be people that will serve all life and they will exist on Earth, but in another version of Earth where Earth does not reset. Right. That's why if you look into spiritual, all the spiritual new age talks to talk about the splitting of Earth,
yeah.
3D, 5D. It
Mm,
doesn't mean that Earth is physically splitting. It's just that there'll be a population of humans that will experience the dense
mm.
version of death, right, and destruction, and there'll be people on Earth that will experience life in harmony and thriving.
Do you think this is going to be on a physical level, or more like the awareness of what's going on will be
Physical,
different?
physical level.
Physical level.
Yeah, literally, actual two different realities will occur at
Mm.
the same time.
And
Oh
what
yeah,
happens when, like in a family, there are some people going that way and some people going the other way? How is that going to look like?
yeah. So one way that may be helpful is, so from my reality, you don't exist. You're just a projection of my consciousness. And then from your God self reality, I don't exist. I'm just a projection of your consciousness, right? So the illusion of there's two separate people here is an illusion.
Of course
And
it
once you
is.
realize,
But it's
right,
fun.
and once you realize that it is we're all one big ocean
Yeah.
projecting into
Mm,
itself, then for example, the let's say there's four family members, right? And let's say three are like manifest, get what I want, happiness, I want more stuff. And the one's like, no, we're going to do things to serve all life. So it's not like the one breaks from the family and then the three die and then the one survives.
mm,
It's the one will create a reality where they all survive because in their reality, we all thrive.
mm.
The three will head towards death, and then the one that lives in their reality, they die. Everyone dies. Does that make sense? Yeah, like
Yes.
literally two different versions of reality will
Yeah.
happen.
Okay.
And I've experienced this infinitely over the last couple of years. Like literally everyone right now is living in their own reality. And in fact, when I say two different realities, really what I predict is every human will live in their own reality. And we're seeing this, like whether it be through AI and VR. Like, I mean, right now there's a million Japanese men who do not leave their parents' house and their bedroom, and they
Mm.
basically play VR all day. They live in their own reality, right? And this is a as above, so below. This is a correspondence to what is coming. We're all going to be living in our own physical reality.
That sounds awful.
It just is. It can be awful if you judge it, but this is just again like God would want to experience infinite versions of itself through
Mm.
infinite versions of reality,
Mm.
right? And so we're just playing that out, and then again we tend to judge good, right, good, bad, right, wrong, positive, negative.
But since we are all interconnected,
Mhm.
there has to come a point of realization that we are not living different realities, but in fact living all just one consciousness, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. That's like saying at some point there will be unity, right? But for unity to happen, there's got to be an experience of separation. You
Mm.
just need that contrast.
Mm.
And so once we realize that, then we can't judge separation as being bad because we need
Mm.
separation to experience unity, right? In other words, if I were to, for you, if you don't move and you want to experience hot and cold, I gotta like make two versions of you and spray one version down with hot, one version with cold. And you go like, oh, okay, I understand what that
Mm.
feels like. And so
Mm.
there's gonna be versions of reality where there's life and death, joy and bliss versus pain and suffering. And
Mm.
again, it just goes back to the totality of reality. Like we're
Mm.
just here to experience it all. And there's no, again, right, wrong, good, bad, positive, negative. We think the world needs to thrive, needs to do all the things. It doesn't, right?
Mm.
Because if we do die, it's just going to reset again and we'll start over again and we'll play
Mm.
another 13,000 years to 26,000 years,
Mm.
right? Again, because when you have perspective of millions of years, you kind of laugh at what's happening. It's pretty insignificant.
I think I can realize what that might look like when I look at a social media account. You know, compare two different social media accounts, two different
Mhm.
realities, two
Mhm.
different perspectives on the world,
Yep.
depending on what kind of information or frequency you give out into the system, into the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah. Social media is a great example of we live in our own reality, right?
Mm.
Like you can have five people with five different interests, personalities, and dispositions, and you scroll at their accounts. It's like five different social media worlds,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because it's just showing them what they want to see. Because whatever they
Mm.
pause at, the algorithm goes, okay, you want to see more of this? We'll show
Yeah,
you more of that.
yeah, yeah,
And that's such a, again, a corresponding reality of we are literally living in our own
yeah,
reality.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's imagine there are a husband and wife, and they start to live in different realities.
Mhm.
And in the one reality, everybody dies, and in the other one, everybody's being enlightened. What
Mhm.
happens when both re-enter the spiritual realm? And for example, right now, as I
Mhm.
understand, and I've talked to many people who had have near-death experiences, there is something like a live review, and you see the things that you did to other people in love, but also in
Mhm.
pain. And when you have completely different realities, how are we going to be interacting with each other? Are we gonna accumulate karma with each other anymore? Or are we just, well, because if you have another reality than I do, then maybe your experience that we had together is completely different than my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in that question. Um, so we technically exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions, right? And so let's just say pretend there's 12, maybe 13 dimensions. And let's just say the 13th one, everything's God, everything's oneness. That's the unity. But below that, there's going to be more and more separation as we go lower and lower in dimensions, right? Just more complexity. And we do exist in all of them. And so your question of like if husband and wife, they have different, like
Yeah.
one believes in thriving, one believes in death, and what happens? Well, what happens is the husband, again, let's say the husband believes in self-gain and leads to human extinction. In his reality, everyone does die, but his spirit and that's experiencing all this is experiencing this in multiple planes of dimension. And so what I'm getting at is even though there's a separation from the higher self perspective, he is realizing that he is not separate from his wife. It's really one. And from
Mm.
that perspective, if the husband got to experience death and the wife's reality got to experience life, you realize all the way back up to the 13th dimension that it's all light and dark or life and death is all one thing.
Mm.
But below that, there's different interpretations, right? What I'm getting at is there's going to be many, many ways to interpret what may happen based on which dimension you want to interpret it from,
Mm.
besides what's happening.
Mm.
Right? So again, this gets a bit complex when
Mm.
you're
Oh, I get what you're
trying
getting
to
at.
mentally understand. And in fact, what I've experienced is that this actually cannot be mentally understood.
Mm.
And I had a great example of this, which is about 2.5 years ago, I was on a phone call with my partner, and it was the first time I bilocated. Like I was literally on the couch, on the phone, and at the same time swimming in a lake at exactly the same time, like just wet swimming in a lake. And as soon as I thought about it, like what in the world is happening, I went right back to just being on the couch. And as soon as like I was like, oh, that was weird, and didn't think about it, I went right back to bilocating. And what I got from that was, my higher self, God spirit was teaching me that, time and space isn't what we think it is. Time is more like a sphere, and you can go anywhere in time, or the non-time way is there's infinite dimensions and versions of now, and your intellect can actually choose where to go in the sphere.
Mm.
But you're only like a dot in the sphere. If you let go of trying to use the intellect to experience it, you use
Mm.
something else, you can be multiple dots, or in fact, the entire sphere at the same time,
Mm. Mm.
right? The intellect is only a dot, right? The intellect is actually the most limiting
Yeah.
way to live
Yeah.
life.
So that's interesting because what you call intellect is the cortical activation, like where we filter our sensory perception. And when we start to inhibit that, be
Mhm.
it through deep meditation or psychedelics, or
Yep.
with me, it always comes in theta state, like
Mhm.
in the night or when I'm falling asleep, or also in very deep meditations, then we access the subcortical parts that give us so much more yeah, vivid information. And of course, everybody knows that a dream, when you are in a really activated theta state, can
Mhm.
feel very physical because we are in that realm, we are in that reality at that time. And
Mhm.
the more aware you become working with these states, the more you can access them on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the context of sleeping and dreaming is really interesting, right? In modern Western context, sleep is when we recharge. So when we wake up, we have energy to do our
Yeah,
awake
yeah,
life.
I know.
In the Toltecs, Aboriginals, and Tibetan ancient philosophies, they flip the script. They spend their awake life gathering energy so that they can lucid dream and navigate the astral plane, which is infinite and not bound by
Mm.
physical matter, so
Mm.
that they can evolve their spirit and remember what and who they are truly 600% more effectively.
Wow.
Yeah, so they literally flip the script. Like they use their awake life to gather energy so that they
And
can
what kind of
lucid
techniques
dream.
do they use in the wake life to gather these energies?
Yeah, I learned 8 of them when I studied at Dharma last year, all about, dreaming.
Mm.
And 4, you have to be at Dharma. They have like very specific symbols activated based on your frequency, like your birth name and your date of birth. And
Hmm.
when you look at these, symbols before you sleep, it allows you to lucid dream and all that gives you more energy.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. The two that you can do without going to Dharma her that everyone can do is I'll give the easier one and then the harder one. The easier one is break all of your routines,
Hmm.
right? When you a lot of people drive to work without thinking. They like just get there because they're not even thinking. I call it zombie mode.
Yeah.
You're not present. You're
Mm,
like somewhere else. You're thinking about other things and you're just like on
of
autopilot.
course.
And that drains your energy, right? And so when you break your habits, you're forced to be present,
Mm,
right? So that's the easiest thing to do. That will give you more energy. The second, which is a bit tougher, which is you want to clear all friction with any humans in your life. And clearing friction doesn't mean you sit there and meditate and forgive them. It means you reach out to them and clear the friction.
mm, mm,
Yeah, because the entanglement of that friction is draining your energy constantly.
mm. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's something that I've been doing all my life, but not everybody is up to solving everything from the past. Some people would just like to keep it where it is.
yeah, yeah. The Dharma Hermes philosophy, again, they don't actually see it as problem solving as well. They look at it as, we were pure energy, right? And then we became physical matter. We densified. And then when we grew up, I believe it's our parents' job in society to densify us even more,
Mm,
right? We learn we're not good enough and we're not loved unless we do things. I mean, all the stories, the common stories, and it densifies us because it's a law of rhythm and polarity. We need to become so dense and so contracted that when we expand from that, we remember our divine spirit selves,
mm,
right?
mm,
And so, yeah, it just goes back to those experiences we actually get to cherish. And, the image I got one time was in those dense moments, what I call heightened emotional experiences, what the mass media calls trauma. These heightened emotional experience moments are like God giving you this gift box, but it's like heavy as hell. And
mm.
you're like, oh my God, this is so heavy. And God's like, you got to carry this. And you're like, for how long? It's like, you'll know. It's when it's time to open, you'll know. And eventually, year 10, 30, 40, 50 years later, you open the box, you see this incredible thing. And God's like, when you see that thing, that gift that's inside this box, then you don't have to carry it anymore. And that gift is meant for you and all life in that moment. It's just your job to carry this. Right. And that's a very different context than we've all been wounded and we need healing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the understanding of the Chiron in the birth chart.
Hmm?
Like the deepest pain that you get in this life is also your greatest healing power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of those statements and things are basically just describing the law of polarity and rhythm.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
these seven original laws basically predates all spiritual practices, all teachings. They're like the seven original codes that every teaching, every knowledge is just a permutation of those seven.
Yeah.
And it's not just seven because each law, I've been able to decode three layers of each. So technically 21,
Hmm.
because every layer deeper of understanding actually changes. So,
It's like what some of the books in this world that has only few verses, also the what do you call them, the from the Kabbalah, uh the little one from the Kabbalah. Just wait a second.
mhm,
The Sefer Yetzirah. Forgot the
mhm,
name. Yeah, like the little verses that contain the universe that you
yep,
can only digest very, very slowly, and preferably when you're not in your rational mind.
yep,
So I
yeah,
have one last question for you
yeah,
that I
sure.
ask all my guests.
Okay,
If with the awareness that you have today, you would be on this earth for the first time today, what would you
okay.
be most surprised about when you watch humanity?
That's such an interesting question. With my awareness, if today was my first Earth experience, what would I be surprised? Um, I guess for me, for the last couple of years, I've simplified my life with all the 36 years of doing all this stuff, which is just do what love would do. And so the surprise really would be if today was my first day of existence and I witnessed humanity, I would be surprised that not everyone is just doing what would love do. That would be my surprise. Like, oh my God, there's actually some violence and there's some whatever. Interesting. That's not what love would do.
Hmm.
That would be my surprise.
And is there anything that you would tell those people that you would want to say to those people?
No, I mean, understanding my current understanding of reality is they're just living their own reality. Like they're just
Mm.
playing a different game. So the surprise is like, why aren't they all playing the game I'm playing, basically, which is
So much more fun.
so much more fun. But I'm not gonna correct them because I recognize their spirit's separate sovereignty of playing that game, whatever they want to experience.
Mm. That's a great parting message. Thank you so much for this really inspiring conversation.
You're welcome.